Game 7. Good morning, SB Nation. It's your boy, Freddie, back again with you another week. And we have a special guest with us this week. We have Caleb Rowden here with us, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey guys, I wanted to let you know, if you haven't done this already, if you got kids running around, driving you nuts, whatever it may be, get the iPad out, get the phone out, put them in the other room. At 10:35, so in 4 minutes, the Stonebrook Kids stream is going to be going live. We got some fun stuff over there for them to do while you guys are relaxing and hanging out with us this morning. So go ahead, grab them, send them over there, get them set up, and then come back on over here, and we will get started with what we got for you this morning.
So Caleb, this is your first week here.
Yes,
how does it feel to be here live with the people?
It feels good. I haven't had anything to do on a Sunday morning since, since March?
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. I had to wake up early this morning. I don't know about all that.
Yeah, I was a little bit late. They were yelling at me because I showed up 30 minutes late. But I was still early. Don't forget, I was still early.
No,
yeah.
I'm excited. I think we're going to have some fun. So
yeah, I'm excited to see what's going to happen today. And the guy that we got down there that's going to be looking at your guys' chats on Facebook and YouTube is Sam. Sam, what you got for us today, Muddy?
Timothy and Kaylin say hi.
Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning.
hello, Miss Marty. Good morning, Missy.
So we're going to be playing a game called This or That. And what it is that you have to pick two household objects and you're going to have to give your reasons for them, and I'm going to roast you.
Do we have to keep the same household item through all of these questions?
That's a good question.
No, you could one or the other.
So I'll pick one, he picks one, and then we
stick
choose
with that through the whole
between
game.
the two.
Yes.
Okay,
All right,
cool.
all right, cool.
All right.
Let's do it. What item? Household
So
item?
our first category is... Wait, we got to pick items. Oh, sure.
Have them pick an item each.
You guys can pick an item each.
All right, one household item. I guess I'm going to go with a broom.
I'm going to go with a whisk.
Okay. Oh, that's
Okay.
interesting.
I don't know if either of these things are going to help us.
Right?
Okay, our first category is dog toys.
Dog toys. Broom.
I think I got to go with a whisk. A broom is going to be too big. They're going to be knocking stuff
No,
off
it's like a
tables all the
stick.
time. I know, but you're going to be knocking lamps off and stuff, running around the house like maniacs.
Nah.
I kind of have to agree with Caleb about the broom because it is
Come
gonna
on,
be
man.
My
Okay.
dogs would destroy the entire house
Okay,
in
to
seconds.
be honest,
dude.
Caleb's is actually kind of funny and kind of cool.
It has to be.
Our
is
next
it metal
category
or
is
plastic?
open a beverage.
Open
Open
a beverage,
A whisk.
whisk.
Oh wow, y'all actually picked the same thing at the same time.
I don't know how you'd get
shocking.
a broom
Yeah,
under
there's no way. The bristles are too soft. There's no hard piece
It's
on
going to
the
be implied.
handle.
It's just not going to happen.
Unless you bash it.
Okay, our next category is security weapon.
A broom.
Broom.
Duh.
I want to keep them further away from it, man.
Wow, just poke them, just keep it far, far back.
It's like fencing.
Right.
With a broom.
Yeah.
Our next category is emergency spoon. Emergency spoon.
Whisk. It has to be a whisk.
I guess a whisk.
'Cause,
Why a whisk?
I don't know.
The
I don't
reason-
want a broom in my food.
Right, because the broom you use to sweep up the floor, and it's just nasty. Even if you sanitize it now, because of 2020. But how you gonna?
And you're going to end up with bristles in the food and stuff. It's just going to be bad.
That's so true. Next category is clean between toes.
Clean between toes?
Yes.
A broom?
I guess a broom.
Don't say whisk.
Why would you use
Don't
a
say
whisk?
I don't know. Why would I use a broom?
Tell us
if
why.
you're cleaning, it's between your. I don't know.
Okay.
That's just-
Our next category is waking up with your significant other.
Huh?
Wake up with your
Wake up your significant other.
wake up your significant other.
Oh.
A whisk because it's small and less painful than if I were to use a broom. Or I could use a broom and like tickle her feet.
Right.
Same thing with the security thing. I'm using a broom so I can keep my distance.
I like
Just
that
like-
one. I like
Just
that
like
one.
take a room, wake up. Start fucking beating them with it.
I like that one.
Our
like
next
that one.
category is stir your coffee.
A whisk.
A whisk.
Yeah, that does whisk do make really good sense to stir your coffee with.
I knew I should have picked a different.
Okay, I have a really important question for you guys. How would you stir coffee with a broom?
How would you stir coffee with the broom?
I
Yes.
guess with the stick side.
The handle. So you would do it like a fire. You would put it in there on top, and then you go
Start
like this with
warming
your
it.
hands, and that's how you would stir it.
Freddie's done this at home.
Fred is
have
like
not-
just
Freddie's
ready
been
to
out of
get on it.
spoons and been like, man, all I got is this broom here, so
I have not.
Our next category is remove a spider.
broom.
Duh.
I think that's a common thing with brooms.
That is the exact tool you use that for.
Our next category is brush your hair. Sorry, Caleb.
Come on now.
Sorry, Caleb. Sorry
A
about
cheap
that.
shot.
Sorry.
I
I just had to. It was so funny not to do that too.
Can I pick neither?
No, you have to pick one.
I guess I'm gonna have to use the broom. I guess.
I don't know. I guess the broom.
But you don't have any hair, Caleb. You
got-
just have a beard.
I got this.
That's cheap.
This needs brushed.
That's cheap.
Yeah, you guys knew I was coming this week. It's not like
No.
it's not like you didn't plan this question specifically
No.
for me.
Our final category is
All right.
unclog a toilet.
Clog a toilet.
This is a head scratcher for everybody.
I feel like the whisk.
How would you do it with a whisk, Caleb?
Did what?
How would you do it with a whisk?
Man, I don't know.
You would have to get an extra large whisk to do it.
I'm gonna go with broom to use the handle down the.
So you would use the handle of a broom.
You could use the
to
whisk
push
to
poop
scoop
down.
it all out. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. That's all I
really
got.
just-
But how you gonna clog? You gotta get.
I don't know.
You gotta get into
But how are you gonna do it with the broom?
the handle, man.
But
to push the
the
poop down.
curves, man. I don't know how you're
the
gonna.
whisk ain't curvy.
I
Either.
don't know. I don't think either of us are getting this toilet unclogged.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Good morning, Miranda. Good morning, Christy. Good morning, Lisa. Sorry, I'm just now catching up with these.
Hi, Missy.
Hope you guys are doing good this morning.
Yeah.
Hi, Lisa.
What'd you say down there, Sam?
Nothing.
Oh. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that little game that we had. It was definitely interesting for us. We didn't know what to expect. I definitely should have picked a better household
Better household item.
better household item because I didn't know what those questions
I don't want to
would
be using
entail.
a whisk for everything. man.
Right, or a broom.
You don't
I mean,
want to use a whisk for your hair, Caleb, that you don't have.
No. I don't know. It
Or
might
your
feel
beard.
good. Like a little
like a massage?
You seen the little dog
a little
massage
massager
with?
tool,
That'll
just like start
it might feel
working
good.
it.
Oh,
I don't know.
man.
But hey, thanks for tuning in this morning, guys. I hope you guys are comfy with some snacks, snuggled up on the couch, whatever it is. But thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the service.
Hey there, everybody. Thanks so much for hanging out with us today on Stonebrooke.Live. We are so glad that you took some time out of your weekend to join us. If you are a Stonebrooker, hi, we really miss you guys. If you've never been to Stonebrook, boy, are you missing out. But there is no Stonebrook in person right now. It will happen in the future. I don't know how long it will be, but once again, we will be able to gather together again and celebrate and just have a great time together. But in the meantime, we are hanging out here online, and that's a little bit about what we're talking about in this series of messages that we're following along with the Meeting House Church in Canada. is looking at this new reality of what has happened in this COVID world. But some changes have happened, of course, we're all aware of that, but these are some changes that have been in the works for several years now, and we're just looking at how should church change to meet our changing culture, the way that people consume information and content, and how can we remain connected even though for the moment we're just meeting online, but even when we gather back in person, there will still be thousands and thousands and thousands of people who won't or can't meet with us in a building, not only in our local geographical area, but all over the entire world. Our mission from Jesus himself is to make connections with and do our best to engage with all these people in our culture, to share what we believe is the greatest message that anybody can hear, is how much Jesus loves them and wants to change their lives. So that's what we're doing in this series. And if you'll notice in this series, as the person that'll be speaking today, her name is Lisa, and Bruxy's been talking the last few weeks, but Lisa is one of the pastors in Oakville, where the Meeting House Church is. She uses an expression I want you to pay really close attention to. She talks about both and. When we talk about having church online, which is what we're doing right now, and even into the future, we want to get much better at that. We want to be able to engage and connect with people, but it's not a matter of one or the other. It's not a matter of we just have to get back to a building, which all of us long for. I miss actually shaking hands, bumping fists, hearing your voices sing together, hearing the sound of the guitars and the drums here, hearing the sounds of the kids screaming and yelling in the Kids Rock area, and even the sounds of the babies crying in Kids Zoo. We just miss the whole experience of hugs and seeing smiling faces. But it's not a matter of that will never happen again. That indeed will happen, hopefully sooner than later. But at the same time, we want to have begin to change our way of thinking to where church isn't simply a place or a program or a time or a building, but it's something that we can do any day of the week and should do any and every day of the week, and engage with our friends and families and the people that we are in contact with every day. We're looking through the book of Acts to see how the early church, the disciples of Jesus who revolutionized the Roman Empire right after the death and resurrection of Jesus, how did they do it without a central location to meet and without a central building? They are actually fulfilled the mission of Jesus. They actually got it done, which is more than we can say for what the church in the United States for sure has done over the past decades. We want to follow their model and see what we can learn from them, see what we can learn from the Meeting House, not necessarily doing every detail, but this is just, as we follow along with this series, it's changing our mentality to get a new paradigm of what church is. So thanks for being here, guys. Sit back. I hope you enjoy this today, and I hope you have a great rest of the week and great rest of Sunday. But for now, let's join Lisa at the Meeting House.
Well, hello, community. It is great to be together today. My name is Lisa Getzi, and I'm one of our Oakville pastors. And if you are joining now on the live stream and thinking, whoa, what am I doing here? That's not who I was expecting to see. I am here for the live stream teaching, which is for Oakville, Milton, and Mississauga, as well as any of you who are joining internationally. But our other parishes are joining on Zoom for their local teaching. So you still have time. They're just getting started. You can go to themeetinghouse.com/live and scroll down and find the parish link there. But you are in the right place. Don't you worry. I'm glad to be with you all today. We are in week 4 of our teaching series this fall called Rebuilding the Church, which we've been tracking in since the beginning of September, as we are looking at how the Meeting House as a church community can adapt and be present in our current reality. That means how we are the church as we love and serve and care for one another within our church community, but also how we love, serve, and care for those in our neighborhoods and the people that we interact with on a daily basis. It's a big task, one that God has given to the church. He doesn't have a plan B. This is his plan for how God expresses his love and his presence to the world around us right now. It's a big task. Are you ready for it? I think I don't know. Sometimes I am. But also, admittedly, thing that I've been spending a lot of time doing during the pandemic, and it's a little bit embarrassing, but I've been at home scrolling through Instagram a lot. So while the pandemic has been hard and the things that we are facing as society have been challenging, the meme game has been strong. Memes being anything that are sort of a phrase or a picture that sort of captures a cultural moment for us to understand. So I just want to show you a few examples that I pulled from Instagram. So this lady writes, after how many months of this do we go from unprecedented times to just the times? It's sort of like the Zoom bingo or Office bingo when you're playing and to someone say unprecedented times. The next one, would you like an extra shot of espresso or maybe an extra shot of dread with your coffee this morning? I know, tough, the stuff that we're facing these days. Or this last one, as we navigate this year, does your timeline look a little bit like that? If anyone watches The Good Place, you might know what a Jeremy Bearimy is. That's kind of what it makes me think of, that the timeline is really not linear, and where we thought we were yesterday and today are really nowhere near each other because each day feels so long. Or as an article I read recently said, we have experienced 5 years of change within the last 6 months. It's a lot. And I don't know about you, but sometimes it can feel like, when will this unprecedented time, as we have been calling it, become back to the thing that we would call maybe more normal, or that we would feel is more normal. There's an article that's been going around, and it's appeared all over the place. It's from a couple months ago, but it's just making its rounds right now. And it talks about, the author, Tara Haley, she talks about something called surge capacity, which is a human's ability to rise up and rally in a time of crisis. And that there's something inside of biologically and inside of our brains that helps us jump to the occasion. And it's good. It's useful for sudden and short crises. But that's not what we've been experiencing. Maybe you had that for the first month back March and April, but now we've been experiencing something that's more prolonged and something that's still a crisis, but still feels unusual. And so the author, she goes on to say, after talking to some experts, that this would be called ambiguous loss. It's unclear and it lacks a resolution. Now that resonates with me when I think about what we're dealing with these days. But it elicits the same experience or the same emotions in us as if we are grieving something that's an actual tangible loss. So some examples I've been thinking of recently, maybe you were thinking back to when you were a kid and going to the playground or dropping off your older child and seeing them run into the playground and they're able to join with their friends before the class day starts. And they're hanging out, hugging, high-fiving, and playing. But now you're taking your kids to the bus or you're dropping them off at school and it's okay, quick kiss, mask on, and you're sending them straight in the doors. And there's nothing that you are looking at in the very real moment saying this is tragic. It's not necessarily that feeling, but there's a feeling that you can't quite put your finger on, and it somehow feels like something is not right. Or you've been missing out on the rhythm of being able to connect with the people you normally connect with at a specific restaurant or a cafe. Or your main outlet of stress relief is heading to the gym and picking up a bunch of heavy things and putting them back down again. But right now that's much harder. It's a good stress relief, lifting weights. But again, those are things that we can't quite tangibly say are tragic. They're just a sense of loss to our normal rhythm of life, but it feels like we're out of place and we don't know when it's going to change, or we don't know when things are going to become more restricted or when they're going to become more lax. And I think that some of the solutions to how to cope with ambiguous loss are things that we can experience within a church community. And so Tara Haley has this list that she provides in her article. And I think some of them, as I mentioned, exist within church. So some of these are just on our own. We accept that life is different right now. Yeah, that's something we need to do, is accept that things are different. We can expect less. And in her notes, she says, most notably, we can expect less of ourselves. Ambiguous loss can feel really challenging when we think that it may be our efforts that are going to fix it. In this case, it's not really going to happen. Our efforts individually, sure, impact and help the people around us, but is much different when it comes to the global pandemic scale. We recognize the aspects of grief. We talked about the ambiguous loss is hard to put our finger on, but there is that sense of grief. We experiment with both and thinking. We're going to get to that in a minute as we talk about the role of the church and the mission of the church, that we are a both and mission as we're moving forward. It's about caring for ourselves and caring for others at the same time, not necessarily one or the other. It's both and. Look for activities, new and old, that fulfill you. Maybe you're not able to go to the gym, but maybe you're able to go hiking. Or maybe there's an art that you've never taken up before. Now's an opportunity to try that. Or an activity you haven't done in the last 5 years because you were really busy. But there seems to be windows of time now where you can fit that in. Here's also where I think the church community comes in. You maintain and strengthen important relationships. We're going to get to more of that in a minute. And build up your resilience. Because the reality is that life is kind of that squirrely timeline. It's not linear. Things are always changing, and we have to learn to be adaptable to them. And that's what resilience is we accept that change has come, and then we adapt to it, and we live out of that. So we're going to jump into our Bibles just before we head into, I'm so excited. I have some friends with us this morning. So it's not just me that's going to be sharing. We have some other people this morning as well. But we're going to grab our Bibles first thing. So I want to take a look at this both and mission of the church, or this both and thinking that I was talking about. So we're going to turn to the book of Acts, which is in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts. And we've been spending our time here in this teaching series because it is a narrative explaining what the early church was like. So these were the first people that were following Jesus, and then Jesus gives them a command and says, go be the church. Go be my hands, feet, mouthpiece on the earth, because he ascends to heaven. And so we're going to pick up when this is happening, just before Jesus returns to heaven. And he tells his disciples this very important statement in Acts 1:8. He says, you'll receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. Now, the word witnesses here is like what we would think of it being, like you've seen something, so you're going to tell other people about it, or you're a witness in court. It's also the Greek word where we get the same word for martyr, which is someone who is wholeheartedly in their faith, that they are willing to give it all. They're willing to lay down their life for what they believe. The word witness means that. And so Jesus is saying, like, I'm using you as my witnesses, maybe good witnesses, maybe lousy witnesses, but regardless, wherever you go, and he starts listing these locations, wherever you go, you're going to witness about who I am and about God's character. He starts by saying Jerusalem. So right in their very neighborhoods, right in their own town, they're going to be witnesses. Then in all of Judea, so kind of their smaller political region. And Samaria, something even bigger, and to the ends of the earth, which at that time, not quite nearly as big as we understand the earth to be now, but it was still a very, very big space. And we're going to see these kind of concentric circles coming up again in the way that we as a meeting house are saying this is the best way in this current time that we think we can be the church that we all need as we share life with one another, but also church as we share life with those who live around us. So this idea of starting small and moving out in bigger and bigger circles. And you may be thinking, in this time, how do I even care for the community around me when it's like questions of like, how do we even care for ourselves when things seem ambiguous or things seem aimless? And I just want to remind us all of our purpose as a church. We are a community and a church that exists to grow loving communities of Jesus followers who live and share his irreligious message. I think that right there is this reminder of this both and thinking, that living is for us as we are interacting in community together. And then the way we also do that is to share it with the people we interact with in our day-to-day life. Sharing maybe with words, sharing maybe with actions, but that we do both and those things. And that's what it means for us to be the church that God has called us to be. I mentioned those concentric circles. So let's take a look at those on a slide. So depending how long you've been tracking with us over the fall and earlier in the summer, this may be new to you, or maybe you're like, yes, I'm starting to understand this. And that's why I'm bringing it up, because it is new. It is something that we have been introducing over the last few months, as I said, the way that we can be the church as we move forward. So starting at the very bottom is huddles. So that's the smallest place. Think of it as Jerusalem. Like you don't have to go very far to connect to these people. Who are the 3 to 5 people that you can connect with easily? Maybe you know them already. Maybe you can already right now, as you're thinking about it, oh yeah, those 3 people or those 2 other people, it would be great to connect with them and we could talk about our faith life and grow together. And the next size up is home churches. That should be a familiar concept to most of us, since that's the way that we have been connecting in community as we turn our chairs inwards to talk about and share together and pray together about what God is doing in our lives. And then hubs is getting some of those home churches together. And then bigger than that is parishes, which used to be what we called our sites. So for us as Oakville, we were the Oakville site, but we're actually now 3 parishes. We are Oakville, Milton, and Mississauga. Because we are quite geographically placed in this part of Ontario, that 3 parishes have popped out of that. And so to help explain some more of this, I have 2 of my friends joining us this morning, which is great. My friend Quincy Bergman, one of our Oakville pastors, who's also host of the after party, which is not happening today. So we're kind of having our after party here. And Laura Jory, who is one of our KidMax pastors. It's great to have her here as well. Good morning, friends.
Morning, Lisa.
Hello. So Laura, let's start with you and just share a bit of a context, because I also think it's lovely that we can share, because we all come from different backgrounds and we all come from different experiences in church. So would you share a little bit with our community, a bit of your background and then your current context?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I grew up as a pastor's kid, as a pastor's daughter, and my family mostly lived in the Kitchener-Waterloo area growing up. And so church, the church building, but also the expression of community of church was a very central part of our life. We spent so much time at the church building, both on Sundays, but for sure during the week too. And then the people that made up our church were very much a part of our life on an ongoing basis. So we always had people over for meals. We often had people staying with us for small chunks of time. And it was kind of just this very natural coming and going with people throughout our church community and then in our neighborhood as well. So for me growing up, it really was kind of like this extended family that was there in all kinds of ways, and sometimes fitting naturally, sometimes not fitting as naturally, but something that was a constant. And even as we moved around to different schools, it was the church family, my church friends, that stayed the same throughout many different years. And so that was a real safety and a real thing that that we could count on in those years.
How about now? What does your life look like now?
Yeah, so we have been living in Milton for the last 8 years. And so when my husband Nathan and I got connected to the meeting house, which is a long time before that actually, the idea of home church and kind of this community expression of what it means to be the church was very natural because of that growing up experience. And in Milton, we've been able to experience this group of home churches, this group of people that call the meeting house home, that was here long before we arrived, but it has been such a lovely place to kind of land and connect and do life together in a variety of ways over the last number of years.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. And how about you, Quincy? We, as I said, we all come from different backgrounds, so our church experience varies. Share a little bit about yours.
Yeah. So I was baptized in the Catholic Church. Less, I think, because of a religious connection and more just, I think, a byproduct of being born in Quebec. But my folks didn't really have a faith tradition until much later on, where they got involved in a Mennonite Brethren church. While they were entering into their faith journey, I was entering into my teenage years. And so I was on my own path and stayed on that path for a number of years to my early 20s. And really got serious. It was the kind of being introduced to this guy named Jesus, who I couldn't put in a box. I couldn't figure out. So my journey in following him and getting closer to him, found myself just falling in love with him and having some issues with some of his people. so the church and the expression of the church was where I found some difficulty. But I got connected with a church in our neighborhood that was a Pentecostal tradition, and I fell in love with the worship and also the people, particularly the young people that I was connected with, and that was a beautiful expression for me. So from there, got involved in a small church plant, and we did some kind of wacky things where we would meet in a park, meet in a recreation center. We would primarily meet in living rooms, always focused around a Sunday evening meal. That was our time. And it was in those expressions where the things that I was reading in the page were starting to come to life for me. And I made this kind of saying that came up in our conversations, that said, if Jesus saved my soul, then I think the church is saving my life in a way that we could really depend on one another, and we could really be authentic and real for and to one another. So throughout that time, the meeting house played a pretty big part, the teaching particularly, in just kind of guiding that and helping us work out these practical applications. So here I am now as one of the pastors here, and being able to continue that journey of what does it look like to move into authentic community and what the church is.
It's great. Thanks, Quincy. And for me, I grew up in a Baptist church. My grandpa was a pastor. But I would say our church was more just a church. Our family was more of a church-going family. I don't know if I would have labeled us as necessarily Jesus followers. Sorry, Mom and Dad. But that would be, church was a Sunday thing, and that was kind of it. And so at the age where my parents said, it's up to you if you want to continue with church or not, I decided to not. But in my late 20s, I remember thinking, oh, maybe God is the piece that's missing. And I also remembered the meeting house as a church my parents had brought me to as an early teen, hoping that church would stick. And so I set foot in the meeting house again and was like, oh, Jesus is way cooler than I remember him being when I was younger, or the way he was described to me. He seems more real and alive and relatable. And also felt just very challenged to live up to the more that I felt like God was calling me to, that I couldn't quite find in other areas of my life. I just sort of felt like I was grasping for things. And I've been here on staff in the Oakville site for the past 4 years, but prior to that was part of an intentional community overseas. We were living and working together in a group of like-minded sisters and brothers, which is both a blessing and a burden when you're living that close with people. And so the idea of, life and ministry sort of meshing together is something that I've also experienced and is not my current reality. I live in an apartment on my own, but do love having my life and the way that I share Jesus be quite intertwined with each other. And I guess that kind of can bring us to the first concept of that concentric circle, which is parish. It's slightly further out, which describes our larger areas, which, you described Milton, Laura, and I'm in Oakville, and Quincy's going to help provide some pastoral care in Oakville as well. But we also represent Mississauga, and know that there's others of you who come from other places. But the idea of parish, we know some people are finding that as yes, this is a new word. What does it mean? And some are like, this is an old word. I don't like it. So Quincy, if you just want to give a little bit of your thoughts around the word parish as we're using it now as a church.
Yeah, it is. It is both a new word for us in our language used to describe what's happening, but it is also a very old word. And I think of back in the day where the church was the center of a lot of communities, and people would be drawn to that. It was the place where you would go for a meal or for community or for big events that would all gather around the parish. But now in our current reality, it's changed where you find church buildings being put up in industrial areas. So it's less of a community piece. But I think it's an opportunity for us to kind of reframe our approach to it, because sometimes with the language like church, we can hijack it or bring all of our old baggage into it, where parish is something a little bit new, and I think implies not just a place, but also a people.
That's good. Yeah.
Where those two things are inseparable in a way. So an example, sometimes when I'm kind of challenging people or messing with them, they find out that I'm a Jesus follower, and they'll say, well, where's your church? And I'll say something just to kind of poke at them. I'll say, well, what time is it? And I say, well, why are you asking me what time it is? I'm asking you where your church is. And I say, well, the time depends on, well, I'm asking you the time because that depends on where our church is, because we're a people who could be at very, very different places depending on the time of day. So to really remind me and provide an opportunity for conversation that we're more than a place that we gather, but we're just as much a people that are gathered for a purpose.
Cool. How about you, Laura?
Yeah, I think when we were talking about this idea before, it was reminding me of a different season in life that has just kind of come to a close recently. But I have 4 kids that were really close together in 5 years. And so there was a lot of years, like a decade of life, where my world was quite small in some ways, very local, just out of necessity of I was at home with these kids and not going very far. And even though I am naturally an introverted person, I feel like I learned in that season that if I wanted to have community around me, that I needed to kind of step out of the space and look and see who are the people that are around me in the natural rhythms of life where I find myself. So at the park and at the grocery store and in my neighborhood and in church connections, and to initiate this kind of welcome and invitation to those people to be a part of the life that I did have. And instead of thinking, oh, it is a hard season when you have young kids to find connection in some ways, but instead of seeing that as a barrier, to say, hey, this is a wonderful opportunity to be present in my neighborhood and to see the people that are here and to do life together in the rhythms where we find ourselves. And so in this COVID season, I feel like I have been thinking of those learnings and that experience a lot, and the way that Jesus was really talking to me about, hey, this is who you are, this is where you find yourself. And instead of feeling limited by that, let's be creative and look at the ways that we can invite other people into the place where you find ourselves. And then
it's like a deja vu for you, right?
That's right. It was. And I think in some ways it's kind of painful. Like some of that is not really what you want or what you would choose. There's some hard things about it, but it was so good to kind of hear from Jesus, hey, you've been here before, you know how to do this. And so lean into the things that I have already taught your heart and look again to see the people who are here and the way that you can extend my love and my welcome to them again in this season. So it's really good.
It's a good reminder, Laura, because I'm sure for many of our friends and for us that are even just watching right now or listening later, that there might be a flicker of something that God has done in our lives before that reminds us of what could happen. Maybe not identically again, as we've talked about other weeks, that, God's Spirit may not move in the same way again, but his Spirit will move and he will provide a sense of what we're talking about here. And when I think of parish, as I mentioned, I live in an apartment building, so it could be something bigger like my whole neighborhood, but I often think of my parish as just being my apartment building, the 11 units. It's like super local. And that idea of welcome that you mentioned, Laura, I think is really beautiful too, because even in our own neighborhoods, sometimes we need to be reminded that we're welcome there, like at a park, just having somebody say, hey, welcome, glad you're here. I live down the street from you. And that it is both the people and the place. And so for some of you also, it might be like, oh, I spend most of my time at the hockey rink because of kids or my own sports. Maybe that is your parish. Or maybe commuting and being in your workplace, that's where you spend a lot of your time. That's the people and the place for you to connect. I mean, the pandemic and having rules about being home has made our neighborhoods really be the place where we have spent a lot of time. I think we would all agree. So that can be an easy place to start. But I do think when we think of parishes, it's where are we as Jesus followers and who are we interacting with in that community as well, that it's not just the Jesus followers that make up the parish. Everybody who lives there makes up the parish. Now, from the really big parish idea to the really small, I want to talk about huddles, which I think a few weeks ago, or maybe it was during the town hall, Bruxy mentioned this idea of like intentional spiritual friendship, and that be the way we can look at our huddles. And we listened to a podcast, the three of us, before this Sunday teaching with my friend Christina Crook, who is one of the meeting housers at the High Park site. And her podcast is called the Jomo Cast, and the joy of missing out. But Jomo is the joy of missing out, but on like the right things so that we can increase human connection. And her guest talked about connecting in places that are facilitated moments of connection, not just these surface level activities. So I'd love to hear a little bit about this idea of huddles. And I know, Laura, you've been working with families in our community to make that happen.
Yeah, so we, as a KidMax team, when we were looking at ways that we can kind of shift gears away from Sunday morning and still have connection as families, it's a big task and it felt overwhelming. But I think it was helpful to my mind to just think, what would I want for my own family? If I was bringing it super close to home, what are the things that would make a difference for my own kids, for my own family in this season? And there's so much about just being together, even with one other person who finds themselves in a similar kind of story. It doesn't even have to be the same, but a similar kind of situation. Say, hey, we're not alone in these things where we're headed towards. If we're trying to teach our kids about Jesus, if we're trying to be present in our communities, to be able to do that alongside someone. So we've tried to kind of gather people together around a place that makes sense in their lives, if that's because they live close together geographically, or if it's because they had relationships prior to these changes that have taken place, to just help people notice, hey, here are some other people that are part of our church family that are close to you in some way. And then is there a way that you can be intentional about being alongside each other in this season of life, if that's to disciple your own kids, if that's to encourage each other as parents, if that's to reach out into your neighborhood. And so hopefully, that's going to be some meaningful connections for different people.
And you've had some funny stories come out of that, like people realizing how close they actually are to each other.
Yeah, it is a funny thing about our sometimes giant parish in Oakville that we gather in this one place and we don't even know where we live. And so there was one story that happened where two families that have both been at our church for a long time realized they lived literally around the corner from each other, and they didn't know. So that was really fun. And then another story that's so neat where a family that's been in Milton and connected to a home church moved to Oakville during COVID, and were they're wanting to stay connected to these other families in Milton because that's where they found community. But through these kind of local connections, there's another family that lives very close to them that has kids the same age, both families really wanting to connect, wanting to find kind of friends with a common heart and a common trajectory. And so it's such a gift to find each other in that way in this season, for sure.
So great. Thanks for sharing that. I know it was it's funny, but it's beautiful when those things happen. Yeah. How about you, Quincy? When you think of huddles, what's been sort of the thought that you wish, you would be able to share with our community?
Yeah. Well, we're part of a very large home church here in Oakville called the Big Fat Friendly Group. Shout out to the BFG. And in that group, it's amazing that so many little small pockets have started popping up, and that they've continued to be creative and to meet on a regular basis. So to me, that's it's beautiful to see that. So whether it's a WhatsApp chat group or it's socially distanced gatherings in person where these things are intentional, they make sense. Based on the rhythms of your life already, and they provide an opportunity for that growth, that encouragement to happen. So, and for those that are kind of not sure, maybe they're meeting with people. I say we just want to give permission to people that, hey, if you've got 2 or 3 people in your life, the way we describe it's probably not the best official way. It was like if you have 2 people that 2 or 3 people that you can say how are you doing, and you don't have to lie to them and say I'm fine, but you can actually be real and vulnerable with them and say, no, this is how I'm really doing. If you can find 2 or 3 people like that is a huddle, and you now moving in a trajectory towards being a little more like Jesus every day, then that's an opportunity for you.
Beautiful. And you mentioned home church, that being the place where huddles do happen. So if you are somebody who is new to the meeting house or has yet to, doesn't know who those 2 people might be, a home church might be a good place to start, because that is where you can meet people. But you're right, huddles in my life has looked like 2 friends, one of whom is connected to the meeting house and one who is not. So we connect midweek, and they're the ones that I talk to about the good and the hard, and who call me out on my stuff, because I sometimes need that from friends in order. I sometimes I'm like, hey, I would rather it be a friend than my mom. We don't always want our mother pointing out those things. So it's nice when it's a friend, right? So good. And of course, this is like this huge, really wonderful concept that we as the Meeting House are moving towards as we are looking at these concentric circles of how to connect in small ways, which I love the huddle. It's 3 to 5 people. It's basically this pandemic proof size because it's the most adaptable to the different types of regulations that get strengthened or loosened. So huddles is a really flexible way for us to stay connected. Like our church is open. We are meeting in small groups, and I think that's really, really fun. So thank you, you two, for joining and helping our community unpack some of these ideas. And friends, as we're going to wrap up, I just want us to look back at Scripture again in the book of Acts. In Acts 2, we see a description of what the early church looked like. So it's Acts 2, verse 44. It says, all the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Now that last line, the Lord added to their number, is this unexplainable thing that happens. You know, all the explanations of what the local church was doing, what the early church was doing. You know, they were gathering, they were eating together, they were sharing with one another and sharing with people in their community. That was the type of stuff that they, as the early church disciples, that we have control over, that we can decide to do. But the miraculous, the only God piece is adding to their number daily. Could you imagine if we as a church prayed that kind of prayer? You know, like, only God, would you be adding to our number daily? Only God, would you be showing us how to be the church to one another and to our communities around us? That we'd see that miraculous, only God type of answer to prayer. Let's talk to God together. Heavenly Father, we are graciously grateful and so thankful for who you are, and that your example of living in perfect relationship, Father, Son, and Spirit, is something that we can look at and mirror our own lives after, knowing that you call us to be in relationship with you, involved deeply in your relationship of Father, Son, and Spirit, but also deeply involved in the relationship with the people around us, the ones that we are already close to and the ones that we have yet to meet. God, would you meet us in our timid steps forward or brave steps forward? And would you be able to just take those steps and make them grow and expand and be supernaturally impactful in our communities and in the lives around us? Thanks that you are the leader of this church. Thank you that you call us and that you unify us. And God, I pray for my friends this morning that wherever they find themselves, that they would feel a sense of encouragement because they know that they are not alone. You are with them always, and they have a community of friends, of sisters and brothers that they can call family. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. And let it be so.
So I hope you enjoyed that message from Lisa, and I just want to sort of close it up with some thoughts of my own. You know, we are, many of us, especially those of us that are believers that have been to church, we are, many of us, starting to really feel that disconnection, and we sort of have this longing to get back together. And since we don't really have an idea of what future church is going to look like, it can be sort of unsettling. And we begin to think, why can't we just go back to the way it was? So why can't we do it now? And, you know, there are different thoughts about that. Some people are really upset that we're not having in-person meetings, and some people are very glad they don't think we should. But above all of that, we are really trying to spend some time praying, trying to figure out what is it that God wants his church to look like. But with regard to wanting to get back to the way things were, it reminds me of a very prominent story in the Old Testament. One of the central themes of what happens in the Old Testament, so much just sort of circles around this one thing, is in 586 BC, the southern kingdom of the nation of Israel was taken captive by the Babylonian Empire and actually taken away into exile into a foreign land. When that happened, in the book of Jeremiah, we find out that some of the prophets, the prognosticators, of the Jewish people began to say, this is very temporary. God is going to even deliver us. Even though we've been taken out of our land, God's going to deliver us, and it won't be long before we go back there. So they began to really resist what was happening. And it really was upsetting for them, being in a foreign land, being under occupation. Their homes had been destroyed. They'd been taken away from everything that was normal, everything that was familiar and comfortable to them. And some people were saying, this isn't going to last. Before long, we'll be back to normal. But the prophet Jeremiah, God actually said, you need to tell them some things from me. And he wrote them a letter to these people in exile. And he said to them these words here: build homes and plan to stay. Plant gardens, eat the food they produce, marry and have children. Then find spouses for them so that you may have many grandchildren. Then he uses this word, and over the next several weeks and months, you'll hear me talk about this a lot. Multiply. Do not dwindle away. What Jeremiah was saying is this isn't a temporary situation. This is a fundamental disruption. This is a cultural shift that has happened, and it's upsetting to you, but settle down in it. This is going to take a little while. Let's get back to everyday life, build houses. This isn't going to be something that resolves itself quickly. Go on with your life, have children, build houses, and then he goes on to say, invest in your local community. Even though you're in a foreign land, it's not Israel, I want you to pray for this foreign land. I want you to get involved. I want you to get to know the people, because when they succeed, you succeed. And that's one of the big things that we are thinking about. It's not just about ourselves and what we want to get back to, but we all live in a foreign culture as Jesus followers. But we want to pray for this community. We want to reach into this community. We want to impact this community. And this COVID disruption gives us a chance to begin to really look beyond ourselves and say, you know, me not being able to go to church is what thousands of people have been experiencing for years in not attending an actual building. How can we pray for them? How can we walk across the street, down the street, across town? What can we do to be a light in this world, in this time which is dark to so many people? So the bottom line, without preaching another entire sermon today, is be patient. Begin to think about your neighbors and others in the midst of the loss that you're feeling and the ambiguity that you're feeling and the unknown future that you are thinking about. In the midst of all that, begin to think of other people who are far from God, who really need what you already have. And how can you be involved, not only individually, but as we go forward as a church, how can you get involved in serving and being a light to our community? Once again, thanks for being with us today. I don't know if I ever told you my name. My name is Mark, one of the pastors here at Stonebrooke. We really hope that you have a great week, and we will see you next Sunday.